There are a few other people in the audience I'd like to acknowledge very quickly. Dr. Tony Eiten from the California Endowment is in the audience. Thank you. Nancy Franklin and Laura Zeff from LAUSD tried to sneak in, but I saw you. And without further ado, I'd like to introduce the moderator for our first panel. Susan Ferriss is a reporter with the Center for Public Integrity, a nonprofit journalism organization based in Washington, D.C., where she covers juvenile justice and has reported extensively on the school discipline issue in California. She's a great reporter. Susan, thank you. Come on up, please. Let's give her a round of applause.
Thank you. Thank you so much. It's great to be here in my home state of California and to see people that are so interested in this subject. For me, it's been a pleasure as a reporter to be able to look into this because we all agree our kids are the most important thing and doing right by them, and everybody says they want to do that, but sometimes we need to peel back the layers of things to see what we may be doing that is not doing right by them. We're going to have a panel next that will look deeply into the problems of school discipline and nationwide and hearing how they've evolved. 5-minute video, and then we're going to have 2 youths who are going to speak to us about personal experiences. So we'll do that first, the video, and then we'll proceed with the panel, and then we'll have questions from organizations that have helped, community organizations that have helped sponsor the event.
Hi. My name is Timothy Walker, and I'm a sophomore at Crenshaw High School in South LA. I am also a member of Community Coalition and the Brother Son Selves Coalition. I want to start by sharing an incident with you all that happened just a few weeks ago. Sean, a student at South LA High School, was hanging out in the quad area on campus. He had taken his uniform shirt off because of the heat. The principal approached him and asked him to put the uniform shirt back on. He refused. In response, the principal called the school police. The police officer showed up and yanked Sean by the arm. Sean tried to get him off, and the officer accused him of hitting him, and then proceeded to call 8 other cops for backup. As a result of Sean's interaction with the police, he was expelled from school. His mother had to advocate on his behalf to get him readmitted back into school. He just came back last Tuesday after missing 2 weeks of school. All of this because of a collared shirt. This example highlights many issues that result in students being pushed out of school. One, the constant presence of school police officers on campus results in the criminalization of young people for minor offenses like willful defiance. Minor offenses that were once handled by a trip to the principal's office now result in heavy-handed disciplinary actions. Two, it reinforces the wrong idea that young people from low-income communities of color are threats that need to be handled by harsh punishments and police presence. Three, it feels like the school administrations don't care enough about us to try to understand what's the root of our actions. Instead, they kick us out of school and punt us to the criminal justice system. I really want to focus on this last point. The overuse of suspensions and expulsions for minor offenses tells me as a young man of color, we are not wanted or respected by adults on our campuses. There is real movement on the state and district levels to reform school discipline, but the power of that policy change is limited if the people responsible for implementing them still view us as criminals, instead of developing scholars and leaders. The violation of our civil rights can be justified by policies like zero tolerance, but they are carried out by individuals such as school administrations, teachers, police, etc. So beyond just reforming the policies, we need to ensure that those adults responsible for us at our schools receive the professional development and support needed to make them more understanding of the issues facing young people in low-income communities. This will greatly contribute to our school's environment where students feel like the administration are key components of our school, where trust and genuine communication are key components of our school culture, where school staff and administrations truly see the value of alternative disciplinary practices like restorative justice and positive behavior support. This is the kind of school culture we want. This is the kind of school culture we deserve. With the support of Russell and Ali and the BSS Coalition, we can make this culture a reality. Thank you.
Hello. Hello. Good afternoon. My name is Cameron Pond. I would like to thank you for giving me the opportunity to share my story with you all today. I am a Cambodian American, and I was born and raised in Long Beach, California. I come from a family of refugees who had to deal with genocide, violence, and trauma. A study from, RAND, found that 62% of Khmer refugees in Long Beach suffer from PTSD. When my family resettled in Long Beach, I found myself dealing with violence and trauma too. I had a near-death experience growing up in Long Beach. I lost my cousin to a drive-by shooting. I watched him die in my arms. By the time the cops arrived, I knew he was gone. I remember how hard it was and still is to cope with his death, to wake up every morning and make it through school, and I barely made it through school. My older brother and sisters all dropped out of high school and told me that I would fail and be a dropout like them. They're not alone, because high school dropouts are pretty common in the Cambodian community. According to 2010 census in Southern California, 36% of Cambodians live below the poverty line, and 38% don't have the high school diploma. Many Cambodian youth drop out of high school. Throughout high school, I felt unmotivated, unloved, and depressed. It made me feel so low, I almost gave up in high school and almost became a high school dropout. When I was a senior in high school, I was kicked out of English class for not bringing my notebook to class one day. My teacher didn't let me back into class and eventually dropped me from the class. It was a week before graduation, and my counselor told me that I wouldn't be able to walk at graduation because of this one class. I got an F in that class and didn't get the opportunity to walk with my classmates. I had to go to summer school and make up the class, and I had to attend EPHS, an alternative high school, to make up the class, and I passed the class with a B. And went back to Poly and picked up my diploma. I felt happy that I graduated, but I also felt sad because after trying so hard, I didn't get the opportunity to walk with my friends. I am the first of my family to graduate and go to college. I was able to see because of these programs like EM3, which stands for Educated Men with Meaningful Messages, and KGA, which stands for Khmer Girls in Action, that helped me build my confidence, helped me build my leadership skills, and most of all, treated me like family and helped me get into college. They helped me make a difference in my community, so I would like to thank them and hope you all who are watching and listening to this hearing support our cause and help us continue making a positive change. Thank you for your time.
We're lucky to have a cross-section of people, because we all know that's who's involved in this. We need everybody to get on board if we're going to figure out solutions to things as difficult as school discipline and problems with it. So Tia Martinez is an independent consultant and co-author of Suspended Education in California, a report of the UCLA Civil Rights Project, a great group looking at data. We also have Rob McGowan, Associate Director of Organizing for CADRE, parents group, very important. And Edward Madison, a parent leader from CADRE. Happy to have you. We have Geoffrey Winder, Senior Manager of Racial and Economic Justice Programs at the Gay Straight Alliance Network. Brandon Serpas, Youth Leader at the Gay Straight Alliance Network. And we have Ramiro Rubalcaba, longtime administrator and educator with the LA Unified School District and a former assistant principal at Garfield High School. It's glad to have him. So we're going to be learning how a presentation from each panelist, and we're going to be on a timeline, so we'll hope you'll respect that, everyone. And I'll have to remind you, I'm a journalist, I don't like to follow rules either and orders, but we're going to have to do that. And Then we'll have some questions, and I'll be calling on community groups that have helped organize this forum to ask questions. And there is a reception afterward, I would like to remind you, where you can ask more questions. Okay, Tia?
Hi, everyone. I'm in the unenviable position of having followed those two powerful youth speakers, okay? And to make matters worse, I'm going to talk to you all about research. And I'm going to do nothing but a bunch of numbers here. But one thing I want to say before I jump into that, I want to say that data is powerful and important, because that data that I'm going to talk about, you're just going to see lots of percents up there, but behind that data are all those human stories that you heard, okay? And when we see this data, and this data is about the entire state, I want all folks out there, because all of y'all have those stories that you heard, to feel less alone, but also to get like the aerial view, right? The view above, and you can see sort of the shape of the river, and when you see those patterns, we can begin to figure out how to work together to change them, okay? So, okay, now I'm having trouble with the computer. Got it. Okay. Okay. Five? Yeah. So, cool. All right. Okay, great. I'm going to have to do this. I'm going to be going through a lot really quickly. Okay, so excuse me about that. If you have questions in the Q&A session, we can talk about it. The first thing I want to say is as we look at these numbers, we should be thinking about why. We're looking at these numbers, I think, because we all can agree on a couple common sense goals. People in this room and people outside of this room. First, we need students to spend more time in school. And second, we need the school environment to be safe and productive so all students can learn. We're going to come back to these common sense goals after we look at the numbers on suspensions and then ask us whether suspensions are getting us to that goal. Okay, so now the data. The data that I'm going to be reporting today is some of the data that the Assistant Secretary spoke of, the Civil Rights Data Collection. This is a data collection that sampled nearly 500 school districts in California. And together those school districts amount for about 90% of students enrolled. And it asked a ton of questions about the students at the schools, the classes they were taking. I'm only going to focus on two of those questions that were asked, okay? First question was, how many students at your school were suspended once? The second one is, how many students were suspended more than once, okay? So when we take those two questions, the answers to those, and we add them together, you get a number which is the total number of students suspended. And that's what we're going to look at today. Not only can we talk about the total number of individual students suspended, now remember, this is not the same as the total number of suspensions, right? Because you've got students in there that have been suspended 5 and 6 times, right? We're talking about individual students. This also lets us think about what percentage of different groups is suspended in the course of a year. And we call this the risk of suspension, okay? Another way of thinking of it, the risk of suspension tells you what your chances are in the course of a school year, if you belong to any of those groups, of being suspended. So, in the state of California during school year 09-10, in grades K-12, so we're not talking just about middle school or high school, around 428,000 individual students were suspended 1 or more times. So that's enough students suspended out of school to fill every seat in all the professional baseball and football stadiums in the state with no guarantee of any adult supervision. That's quite an image, huh? So that I just talked a little bit about what we call the unduplicated count of young people that were suspended. Now we're going to talk more about the risk, okay? And an important thing about this kind of risk of being suspended is that it differs quite a bit by race. And let's go through and take a look at what in 09-10 in California, the different chances of suspension were. So 1 in 5 African-American students were suspended 1 or more times. That's 18% of African-American students enrolled in the state. 1 in 9 Native American students suspended 1 or more times. That's 11%. 1 in 14 Latino students suspended 1 or more times. That's 7%. Now compare these numbers here to the next two numbers. 1 in 17 white students suspended 1 or more times, 6%, and 1 in 33 Asian American students suspended 1 or more times. That's 3%. This year, a lot of improvements the Assistant Secretary was talking about have been made in how the data is collected. And one of those is now we can talk about what suspensions rates were for students with disabilities by different race groups, okay? So there's a lot of reasons why we might think that these rates would be lower. Students with disabilities have more procedural protections around due process, and they also are required to have behavior plans in place so they can get more resources. Unfortunately, that's not what we found. When we looked at it through the lens of race and disability, 1 in 4 African American students with disabilities were suspended 1 or more times, 1 in 7 Native Americans, 1 in 8 Latino students, 1 in 9 white students, 1 in 20 Asian students. Now, up here you can see what happens. The orange line right there with the 28% up top, that's the percent of students with disabilities who are suspended. The blue line is that same group, in this case African Americans, students without disabilities. And you can see the gap between them shows you the difference that's happening there. So this is the broadest picture of what's going on in this state, right? So the question then is, compared to other states, what does this look like? Is this meaningful, right? So what we needed to do is say, listen, is suspension risk in California higher or lower than what it is in other states? When we looked at that, we were able to estimate suspension rates for 47 states using the CRDC data, right? And for every subgroup, California was above the average. Now, when you look at the whole picture, they're hovering around the average, but for certain subgroups, it's a really, really serious issue. So if you take all of the states, stack 47 states high, right? You get the lowest suspension rates on the bottom and the highest on the top, right? Whoa. California is the 6th highest for black students with disabilities, 8th highest for Asian students, 11th highest for students with disabilities, for white students with disabilities, and 13th highest for. So that was about half of my presentation. So, but it sets the stage for what you're going to hear afterwards about what are the really powerful alternatives and solutions to this. Okay, thank you.
Good afternoon.
Good afternoon.
Wow, that was powerful. Many of us may already know this, but it bears repeating for the purpose of CADRE's presentation today. The California Educational Code laid out the following description and only guidance for determining willful defiance. If a student disrupted school activities or otherwise willfully defied the valid authority of supervisors, teachers, administrators, school officials, or other school personnel engaged in the performance of their duties. We would like to consider this description alongside an excerpt of a definition of criminalization as offered by our close allies at the Youth Justice Coalition. Criminalized people and populations do not need to engage in illegal or harmful behavior to be treated as criminals, but are regularly targeted for surveillance, police stops, frisk and questioning, and school suspensions and expulsions. Criminalization also often extends beyond police and court systems to impact the larger society's perception and treatment of the individual or group. If we put these two definitions side by side, then we consider that 1 out of every 6 African American students are suspended in California, that willful defiance accounts for the largest single ed code justification for suspensions across the board, and that CADRE, in our 4 years plus of monitoring school-wide positive behavior support implementation, has seen site-level data of South LA schools that show willful defiance as the #1 reason African American students are referred to the office or disciplinary reasons. We believe that a serious problem with severe racial equity and civil rights implications looms large, and one that urgently deserves focused attention and the commitment of long-term resources toward solutions. With wide discretion With the wide discretion that the definition of willful defiance provides, the research showing that African-American students receive harsher punishments for similar behavior by their fellow students, schools are clearly perpetuating a level of systemic exclusion and criminalization that parallels the experience of African-American adults. With all the data that has been just presented by Tia, sorry I didn't get a chance to finish that out, but at the Civil Rights Project, we should no longer separate what's happening in schools from what's happening in society at large. However, this data is just data and not sufficient by itself. First, we need more detailed disaggregated data and data collection and sharing required by all schools for every category of suspension. Data must be broken down by race, ethnicity, language, gender, and disability. Good move. This data must be publicly available and readily accessible to students and parents. Secondly, we need viable alternatives such as school-wide positive behavior interventions and supports and restorative justice to be culturally responsive and evaluated for the impact on racial disproportionality of school discipline. Third, we need to ensure that African-American parents, caregivers, and families are accorded full due process in their right to monitor school policies and practices and access information that address grievances related to unfair school discipline. And now I'd like to introduce Eddie.
Thank you.
To a core parent of CADRE in South LA.
Thank you.
Good afternoon. Oh, good afternoon. This thing is on, all right. At CADRE, we believe that all children have the human right to dignity and a quality education, no matter where they live. We also believe that parents have the human right to participate in their children's education. Yet, we've seen that African-American parents are oftentimes not including in figuring out why students act out, or they're given information rather than the opportunity to discover their child's issue and support a solution that addresses the root cause. We've also experienced that African-American parents don't feel that schools are accountable to us for the education challenges our kids face at school. Yet it's implied and often directly stated that we are responsible and blamed when they aren't successful or act out at school. As a result, we've seen a decreased number of African-American parents participating at schools. Yet schools are asking us, why aren't more African-American parents participating? We feel the use of suspension is a way of not just giving up on African-American students, but giving up on their parents, caregivers, and family as partners as well. The consequences of this over time has been multiple generations of African American whose normal adolescent actions have been criminalized. They've been pushed out of school's environment, disconnected from formal education, and end up with a non-high school diploma. Then they have to compete for jobs with people who have college degrees or at least a high school diploma. Then they even have kids who are treated the same way. This cycle not just maintains, but increases the rate of African Americans in prison and in poverty. We CADRE parents support the passage of LAUSD Discipline Foundation Policy because we feel that having school document, calculated data, and being trained on the latest positive support practices, and most important, to give parents, caregivers, families, and the opportunity to be fully involved by being on the school's SWPBS teams, to have access to discipline data, to give analyze and input regarding that data, and to hold the schools accountable by being able to monitor how well alternatives are used instead of suspension. Since data-based decision-making was one of the key principles, we also feel that giving us the chance to have access to specific discipline data in order to really measure the impact of willful defiance, we need more disaggregated data. Data collection and reporting, data that is broken down by race, ethnicity, language, gender, disability. Now, Rob will wrap up our time with the next steps.
To the local district, we feel that 100% graduation cannot be achieved when you have African-American students being disproportionately affected by suspensions. We're calling for the district at all levels to collect disaggregated data broken down by race, ethnicity, language, gender, and disability, and share that data with parents, students, caregivers, families, and community, give an accurate assessment of how willful defiance is being used. Lastly, as a part of the National Dignity in Schools campaign and a new initiative called Solutions, Not Suspensions, we're calling on local school districts as well as districts across the nation to implement a moratorium on non-serious out-of-school suspensions. We believe every child deserves a chance to reach their full potential regardless of race or of ability. A moratorium allows schools to implement effective in-school disciplinary practices and alternatives for African-American students, and we can replace an unfair life sentence with life lessons that prepare our African-American students for success. Again, looking at root cause analysis and planning.
Thank you.